Hello, AYT viewers. I'm Sam. I'm the director of the company, and today I am joined by the wonderful Tabby Lamb. Hi, Tabby.
Hi, Samuel.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you doing today?
Yep, I'm all right, thanks. The heat's gone up again, hasn't it?
Oh,
Yesterday it
it
was
really
cool down.
has. I'm not, it's just, I live in London and London is not the one for heat. It's not built for it.
Yeah, I hate talking about the weather, but I feel like there's nothing else to talk about at the moment because
Yeah,
it's
it's not like
just.
there's anything else happening in the world, right?
I know. But I'm actually. I used to be in London. I've
Hmm.
moved away now, but I'm by the sea and I feel like it's probably as hot as London. Don't get too excited because it is good, but yeah, it's
At least you can
it's
go for a swim in the
ordinary.
sea if you need, though.
But you know what? The sea is absolutely freezing.
Yeah,
It's
I'm not
like,
surprised, to be
and
fair.
I keep being told that I'll get used to it, but then I just never get used to it. I think I'm just a bit too precious. I don't know. But yeah, anyway, back to the case in hand. So I'm gonna do a little intro on Tabby. So Tabby is a non-binary writer and performer based in East London. Their debut show, Since You've Been Gone, premiered at the Edinburgh Fringe in 2019, which feels like decades ago now, after previewing at the Gate and was received spectacularly. Tabby also co-founded the devised feminist theatre company Holly and Ted in 2016, is a facilitator and runs creative arts projects for young LGBTQ plus people, runs the meetup group Queer People in Theatre, and is an associate for Middle Child, Stratford East, and Oxford Playhouse. There you go, the result of a bit of stalking from me.
Ooh, little bit of blowing my own trumpet. Thank you very much.
Is there anything
Appreciated.
you want to add? Then now's the time. You will get another opportunity. I'm sorry.
What else? I'm also a Pisces. Done. Sold.
Oh, thank God. I feel like the whole interview is made now. Thank you for that. So before we get properly stuck in, I've got a couple of exciting things that I just wanted to speak to you about. So on the Tabby Lamb website, it says that you are inspired by Tennessee Williams, but I don't really care about them. Who I care about is Carly Rae Jepson. So are you
My
are you a fan? Because that
Oh, I am
really
a
it just made
complete,
my day.
I am a stan. I like even further, like I'm literally wearing my Party for One underwear right now. Um, I have the days of the week Party for One underwear merchandise. The last live show I saw before lockdown was Carly Rae Jepsen in Berlin. I did the VIP meet and greet, got the world's ugliest photo with her, and gave her a copy of Since You've Been Gone.
Oh my God, did she love that?
She did. She was very sweet, and I told her to read it and put my email in it, and was like, "If you want to write a musical, let me know." And she never got back to me, and so therefore, I decided to unstamp. No, I didn't. I couldn't. She's too
You
good
couldn't
and too
ever.
iconic, and I love her. And if I keep mentioning her in every single interview I do and in all of my blurbs, then maybe one day she'll work with me. That's my plan.
I feel like I spend most of my life kind of reintroducing people to her because their only point of reference is Call Me
Call me
Maybe.
maybe. Yeah.
That's just like I get it because it was such a big hit, but she's done like 3 albums since then, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they've all been
Well, four,
absolutely.
including the B-sides.
So there was some Emotion dedicated. Oh, was there another?
Yeah,
Was there
there's
a
Emotion
side? Oh
B-sides,
my
then
God, I'm
dedicated
sorry.
and dedicated B-sides as well. Come
Okay,
on.
that's another album I need to get on.
It's really good. It's really good.
So I was supposed to see her, I think 2019 in London. It might be in the same show that you went to, but in
Yeah, so she
Berlin.
was, she did, I can't remember where she played now, but it was the exact same times as the run of Since You've Been Gone at Vault. And I was so gutted that I then booked a flight to Berlin and went and saw her in Berlin instead.
I mean, absolutely. I really wanted to go, but I couldn't get the time off work, so I worked in evenings, and no one would take the shift.
That's rude.
So yeah, I was just going to go by myself because obviously none of my friends wanted to go because they just don't appreciate it. But hey, I'm so happy that we could have this.
Next
That we
time
could
she
share
tours, we'll
this.
go. You and me, we'll be there
All
at the
right, great.
front, dancing. It'll
I'm
be
going to
great.
hold you to that. And we'll be backstage, forcing
Yeah,
our
we'll be
friends to
best
come to
mates by
her.
then. It'll be perfect.
Okay, great. So the second thing that I wanted to speak to you about is the fact that you are engaged.
I am engaged,
Congratulations.
yes. Thank you. My
Amazing.
my partner is very private, so it's not something like when I put it on Twitter, like there were so many different drafts of that tweet to make sure that I didn't give too much away and that it was
Yeah.
all very sweet. But I'm very happy. He proposed like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now, and we're just being cute and blissful and queer in
Yeah.
love.
Yeah. Yeah, just enjoy it. I mean, I don't know if you've already got plans for the wedding, but my advice is just to make sure that we are well and truly out of this hellhole.
Oh, 100%. It is. I mean,
Because,
weddings are expensive. It's not going to happen for a long time. I
yeah,
work in the arts, babe.
yeah. I got married in October, and it was
Congratulations.
thanks. It doesn't feel like I'm married because I went straight back into lockdown, but yeah, it was a lot. It's a big lead up. I had to cut a
Yep.
lot of people. I had to break a lot of bridesmaids' hearts, but
Aw.
oh well. You win some, you lose some, don't you?
Yeah. You can still have a massive party at the end of everything and just a
Yeah,
double celebration.
exactly. Yeah. So obviously you've got so many projects on the go, but let's start with talking about Darling, which is your latest one. So can
Yes,
you just tell
please.
me and the viewers a little bit about that, please?
Of course. So, Darling is a queering of the Peter Pan mythology. It follows a character called Darling, who you may have recognized from former versions of the Peter Pan story under another name.
Yeah.
And it follows their journey essentially once they're back from Neverland and how they adjust to the real world, and how their queerness impacts on that and the things that they learn from Peter, but also from other people uh, in the Never Never, like Tiger or Tink and people like that.
Amazing. So what inspired it? What made you put this together? And why and how did it end up as audio as well?
So I have been obsessed with Peter Pan for literally my entire life. Like I am just a nerd. To me, Peter Pan has always been like, it's obviously super problematic. Like there's a lot of dodgy stuff in there around the Native American tribes and their representation. But Peter himself, I always thought of as a bit of a trans icon. Like he's a bit of a dick, but he's also like everyone loves him, and he doesn't want to grow up to be a man, which I could really identify with.
Right,
So
right.
when I was first reading it as a kid, I was like, why do I identify with this person who doesn't want to be a man? Why is that something that rings true to me and my experience? And I just sort of got, I mean, I'm autistic, so I have special interests and I get fixated on things. And Peter Pan is one of those things that I have been fixated on for about 25 years now. And there's always been different versions of the story going around in the back of my head. And it was actually just before Christmas, I just threw out a little tweet being like, who's going to commission me to write the queer Peter Pan audio play of my dreams? And then 45 North were like, we will. And that's literally how it happened. So it was very like throwaway. I was like, I've got nothing to do for a week. I want to write a new play. I want to do something that we can get out for free, that is accessible for like most people,
Mhm.
that is really like, it was essentially, because it was just before Christmas, I was like, I want to give a Christmas present to the queer community. And I have no way of doing that myself. So someone helped me. 45 North were like, okay, but we can't do it in Christmas because we need to make it really good and get some really cool people involved. So let's do it a bit later. And
Yeah.
that's what we did, basically.
Now, speaking of cool people, how did David Hoyle get involved?
Oh my God. Oh, I've dropped my laptop. Sorry.
All
Um,
good.
so David Hoyle got involved once we brought on Joe Tiabji as the director. So I was chatting with Joe about possible different people that could read for it that would fit the character. And Joe was just like, the voice I keep hearing going round and round in my head is David Hoyle. What do you think? And I was like, oh my God, do you think they would do it? And it turns out that they would. And he was the sweetest person to work with. Like, just, I mean, he's a queer icon for a reason. He's
Mhm.
done everything. He knows everyone. He is just so multi-talented, and his voice, it's hypnotic and it's melodic and it's
Yeah, totally.
beautiful. As soon as I heard them read it for the first time, I was like, oh yeah, this is perfect. This feels like, it feels like a queer bedtime story, which is the vibe
Mhm.
that I wanted to go for. I wanted it to be something that queers could listen to before we go to bed, or when we're, if the weather's like this, when we're going on a walk through Hackney Marshes, or, you
Mhm.
know, in these weird times, just a little bit of magic for us, really.
Yeah, I completely agree with that word melodic. Because when I listened to it, there was so much of this, but then at the same time, it just felt so real and so raw, especially
Mm.
like when you use terms like, you know, dyke and queer, and it's words that we have now, you know, claimed back, but it still kind of like strikes a chord, doesn't it? I think you still kind
Yeah.
of
And I think with David's history, like David has been around fighting for queer rights and getting queer representation in the mainstream and in the sidelines for decades. And
yeah.
he brings with him this power and knowledge of the community. Like, they were around in the 90s doing queer TV shows on Channel 4, like when no one else was. And they were fucking with gender and with presentation and all of these things before it became mainstream. Like, we were having a chat and they, about like gender, and they were like, oh, I love all these new terms, all these new things about like non-binary and whatever. Like, I didn't understand these words. I didn't have these opportunities when I was younger. And now I get to see all of these younger queers living their true selves, and it's great. And he's
Yeah.
just, oh, I love him so much.
Yeah. I what was it like to speak to someone that I guess is a queer elder? Because I feel like there's such a lack of that in the community. And I feel like since shows like It's a Sin came out, I think a lot of young queer people are maybe looking to the older generation to actually like gain information from. So what was it like
Well,
speaking to them about that?
there are so few queer elders. That's the thing.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
we lost generations of them. We lost,
yeah.
and specifically artists, we lost
Mhm.
so many. And I think we can learn so much, especially when it comes to things like the fight for acceptance, for trans rights, for things like that. Like, people like David have been doing this for generations and understand what it takes, and understand that like niceties won't cut it. And sometimes you do have to fucking throw a brick, and you have to fight back as hard as you can, because it's the only way people will listen. And it's something that I've really been exploring in my work recently. Actually, I'm writing another play called The Village Hall, which is all about, it's about a 75-year-old trans woman, and it's inspired by the first trans woman I met, she was the MD at my village amateur dramatics group.
Right.
So in my tiny amateur dramatics group in this tiny village in the Midlands, there was this iconic 75-year-old trans woman who would play the piano and tell us all to belt our tits off and just be like brilliant. So it's inspired by her. And I think we need to listen, and we need to learn from them, because we obviously have such a huge fight still ahead of us. But also, when you
Mhm.
look back just over the last 50 years, we've achieved so much as well.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
about recognizing that and utilizing those skills. Like, yes, we have Twitter and we have Instagram, and we can do virtual blackouts and things like that when we need to, but they were there on the streets fighting tooth and nail for, not even for acceptance. Like, they didn't give a shit about acceptance. They wanted the right to fucking live freely
Yeah,
and not conform. And I love that.
yeah. And I think as important as equality is, I think it's also important to just think about the fact that we should celebrate our differences
Hmm.
as well, and not just think, okay, we want to be the same as you. We want to, you know, conform to this heteronormative society. We want to,
Yeah.
you know, we want to celebrate who we are and why we stand out and our uniqueness
Yeah.
too. Okay, so let's talk about since you've been gone. You were supposed to do that. You're supposed to tour that last year.
Yeah, we were
weren't
supposed
you?
to be doing a UK and international tour. We'd just finished our London date, and then I went to Berlin for a few days to go see Carly. And when we got back, we were meant to be going to Switzerland and around the UK and Australia and loads of really cool different places. And none of it happened. Which at the time was like super heartbreaking, but
Yeah.
like if the only thing I lost was a few gigs, like I've done all right in the past year. When you look at how everyone else has I don't know, the hand that has been dealt to other people this pandemic, people, there are thousands, probably millions of people who didn't survive it at all. So
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that we got to do the show at all. I'm grateful that we had a recording of it, so we were able to put that online, and 10,000 people watched it, which is insane. Like, there's no way we would have got that many people to see it on tour. So I'm very grateful that we managed to get it out into the world, and I somehow managed to still sell all of the copies of the playtext that I had for the tour. So I spent a lot of time in lockdown just posting things out and remembering to do all of my post wearing gloves and not lick envelopes and all of that.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think Carly Rae Jepson was one of the people who watched it? Because I think she was.
I hope she was, but also I'm like, if you watched it and didn't email me, does that mean you hate me?
Oh God.
Because you do have my email. Like, I don't know. And she was, you know, I love Carly to death, but she was also quite busy during lockdown gallivanting around on holidays with a new boyfriend. So I was a bit like, "Ooh, okay, okay."
Yeah, I reckon she's just waiting until things are kind of calming down a bit, and then she's going to sit down with a cup of tea or a glass of wine, let's say a glass of wine,
Yeah.
and she's going to drop you an email, and the rest is
I mean,
history.
I'm waiting for that day. I've still, the amount of times I've pitched Carly Rae Jepsen jukebox musical is ridiculous, and it's gonna happen one day, and I'm gonna do it. I'm just putting it out there.
What's been the feedback when you've pitched that?
I mean, there's one producer who is very, very interested. We're just wondering about rights, but I have this great, I think it's a great idea of a queer love story called Romeo and Julian. And I just think it would be great. And yeah, I've got the pitch ready. You know, if you're out there listening, Carly, come on, let's do this. Let's write some new songs for it as well.
Yeah,
we can work together. It'll be gorgeous.
Yeah, I think she'll watch this interview anyway. So
yeah, I've heard she's a subscriber to A Younger Theatre, right? She's one of the biggest Patreons.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna hashtag Carly Rae Jepson anyway. So
perfect.
Okay, let's talk about theatre queers. I'm really interested in this. So where did the idea for this space come from?
So Theatre Queers started years ago. It was when I was in Edinburgh doing Holly and Ted shows. And so Holly and Ted is a performance duo that I started at uni with my friend Holly. And Holly is like still one of my best friends in the world, but she is cishet. Our producer was cishet. Our lighting designer was cishet. Everyone was cishet. And I just didn't really know that many queer artists. And I wanted to see queer work, and I wanted to meet queer artists. And there wasn't a specific space to do that. So I approached Underbelly and asked if they wanted to partner with us, and they said yes. And so for the first year in Edinburgh, it was weekly meetups at Edinburgh Fringe, and it was just an open space for queer people to come along to share, excuse me, to share flyers for their shows, to promote their shows, to just sit and have a gossip, to chat, to support each other, because like Fringe is such an alienating experience anyway. It can be exhausting, it can be traumatic. I've had like some of the worst times of my life have been at Edinburgh Fringe because it's just very intense. So to find a community was really important to me. And it was like, I always say, I started it really selfishly. I wanted to meet these people. I wanted to get to know people. I wanted to find out what work I wasn't seeing, what companies were great but couldn't afford the PR machine that you need at Edinburgh and things like that. And it was fantastic. And in that first year, we had over 1,000 people come through theatre queers at different points. And so we continued and ran it again at Edinburgh the next year in association with Assembly this time. And then at the start of 2020, we were like, let's make a London one. Like, we all still need community here. The world is still fucked here. There's still a load of shit happening that we need to fight back against. And also there's loads of cool work happening that we don't know about. So let's set up a London theatre queers, and Soho Theatre partnered on that. And we managed to have 2.5 meetups in person before the pandemic hit.
Right.
One of them, we had to decamp to another local pub because Dean Street was shut down due to a unexploded World War II bomb being discovered,
Nice.
which
Right.
was very dramatic. And then after that, we went into lockdown basically, and I spoke to Jules Howarth, who runs it with me from Soho Theatre, and we were like, we need to do something to keep this community going and to support people and just to give people the space to be surrounded by queer people. So we now run Zoom meetups every 2 weeks on Thursdays. So we have one coming up this Thursday, which is, well, I don't know when this is going out, but we have, basically check my website, tabbylamb.com/theatre queers. It's got all of the dates on there for all of the different times that we do it. And you can sign up to the mailing list there, and you just get emailed a link, and it's a really chill space. Sometimes we have outside guests come in who want to run sessions. So when the trans casting charter was being put together, Outbox Theatre came in and talked to us and took our opinions, and we helped put that together a bit. But most of the time we just have a bit of a gossip. We chat about what we've watched on Netflix. We chat about work we're getting up to. We chat about what takeaways we've had or what we've cooked that week. And it's just a space for queer people to be with queer people. And hopefully we'll move back to doing some in-person meetups as well. But I want to keep this online aspect going forward because we've managed to have a really international audience for it as well. We've had people from New York coming in. We've had people from Canada. We've had people from Scotland. We've had people from Brazil and Germany. And it's just really nice to make those connections. Like, the main reason that I wanted to tour Since You've Been Gone internationally was to meet international queer artists and see what work was being made in other places and see if there's any collaborations that could happen or see what would inspire me. And I managed to still make those connections and meet those people during the pandemic anyway, without the show going away. So that was fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I guess just lacking that in-person aspect is, you know, is not great. But I mean, just getting to speak to international people as well.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't be able to do that in the Soho Theatre.
No, totally. And it also means that it can be a bit of a safer space, because when we meet at Soho Theatre, we meet in the bar. So it's not a sober space. We have specific sober tables for us, but like, there will always be alcohol around. There will always be other people there. So it's quite noisy, and like, we don't have captioning in person, whereas all of our meetups have captioning and things like that. So it does mean that we can be more accessible, both like location wise, but then also like for people who have access needs as well. We can take that into account a lot easier. But I'm hoping we can bring things like that into the in-person meetups as well at some point. But at the moment, we're completely unfunded. It's me just buying a pro Zoom account and going from there. Hopefully at one point in the future, we will have some funding and be able to do more. But oh no, we had a little bit of funding actually, because we had a little bit of funding with a show that I'm developing. Part of the bid was to give some money to theatre queers to run a course. So I ran a course with theatre queers at the beginning of the year called Write Your Truth, which helped queer and trans writers to work on autobiographical material and then showcase that work to theatres around the country and in London. So that was really good. And we had the support of like Northern Stage and Royal and Derngate and the Traverse and Donmar Warehouse and places like that. So it's been really well received by the theatre community. And one of my hopes is that like theatre queers isn't me, it's just a bunch of queer theatre people in a room. Like if anyone regionally is like, oh, I want to do a theatre quiz North or a theatre quiz Cornwall or whatever, I'm like, yes, fucking do it. Let's just make communities for each other, because that's the best thing about being queer, is these communities and these support systems that we put together ourselves because we've had to, and because we don't trust other people, quite rightly.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk more about this later, but I just feel like just representation generally on stages, especially the big stages, is just really, really poor, and
Yeah.
it needs sorting out. But let's talk about more about that later on. So I listened to your episode of the podcast, The Callback with Emma Bentley.
Oh yeah. Oh God. Oh no.
It was awful, awful. No, I'm joking.
I mean, it is quite an embarrassing episode. I do talk about some rather embarrassing things. But Emma's one of my oldest friends. We went to youth theatre together when we were like 15. So I call her Bentley. Like we've all called her Bentley forever. We did plays together for years before either of us went off to uni or drama school or whatever. She's one of the best people in the world.
Yeah, she's great. She was writing for us for a while.
Yes.
So it was really good to have her input, some really good articles from her. So in that episode, you talk about self-care and about building this into rehearsals and shows. Have you had conversations with other theatre makers and venues over the past year about implementing this more?
Yes, 100%. It's been one of the biggest conversations that I've been having with people, has been about self-care, specifically for queer and trans artists, and then again, specifically for queer and trans artists making autobiographical work. I feel like we are often expected to make that work and expected to exploit our trauma in a way that cis people and cis straight people just aren't. And there's always an expectation that like I wrote Since You've Been Gone, it's about the death of two of my dead best friends. And now I don't think I would write that play. I think that play I felt like I had to write because I felt like I had to exploit my trauma essentially in order to get theatre to notice me. I'd done shows beforehand, and I'd done shows about dinosaurs and about mermaids and about fucking camp feminist stuff, and they were really fun. They weren't amazing, but they were fun and they were good, and no one noticed or cared until I completely bared my soul. And like I'm really glad I made that show, and I'm really glad that the tour was cancelled. To be very honest, it's not something that I think would have been a sustainable run for me. I found it really, really hard to do it every single day, and the Edinburgh run was just a nightmare. I found it so traumatic and painful, and I didn't understand why, and I couldn't understand why, because I was like, I've done Fringe before, I've done all of this before, I don't know why this is so much harder. And it's because it was real and it was true, and I was talking to my dead best friends every single day in front of an audience of cis people who didn't quite get it and would leave afterwards and be like, oh, wasn't he good? I mean, they good. And I was like, obviously there were people who got it and there were amazing queer audiences, but it very much felt like I had unwittingly made a show about queer trauma for cis people. And that is something that really pisses me off now. Like I was younger. I mean, not young, I'm quite old, but I didn't know it at the time, and I've learned a lot from it, and I'm glad I did it so that I've learned those lessons, and hopefully if I have any form of a platform, I can use that to encourage queer people to fucking write fiction, write crazy shit. Like, we should be allowed to write these mediocre, boring plays just like everyone else. The true equality will be when we can write a mediocre kitchen sink play and get it on at the Olivier for no fucking reason. I mean, if cishet white men can do it, why can't we? But for those who want to make autobiographical theatre, and there are a lot, because it is a really important genre and there are incredible people out there making it, I want to empower them to do it safely and to do it with structure in place, with a mental health first aider, with charity support, with understanding when to say no and when to stop pushing yourself and when to ask for help, because I didn't know or do any of that. But going forward, I am.
Yeah. I think as creatives generally, we're just constantly pushing,
Mhm.
We don't really recognize when we're about to burn out or when
Yeah,
we
not at
need
all.
to stop. Or even if we do recognize it, we're like, well, if we don't keep going, then we're not gonna get anywhere. We're not going to achieve success.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with and especially more if you're queer, I think definitely. And as you said, you feel like if you're going to get attention, you need to exploit your trauma, and that is the only way to get
Mm.
recognized. But I guess, I mean, I spoke to Rob Madge last week about their play My Son's a Queer,
Yeah,
but what can you do, which was
I love
just,
Rob.
it was such a great chat,
Yeah,
I mean,
they're just great. They're just a genius, I think. I adore
yeah,
them.
it was just, I mean, I spoke to them with my husband Jay, who's also AYT's reviews editor, and it ended up just being a great chat. It was probably like the sort of chats you have at Theatre Queers.
Mm.
It was just, yeah, but I mean, that show is about queer joy and
Yeah,
about, and I guess what I'm trying to say is just you can still stick to being autobiographical, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it
yeah,
has to be about our
totally.
or it
I
has
think,
to be about AIDS, that sort of thing.
yeah, it doesn't have to be about chemsex. Um, but I think queer joy is just so radical, and we don't see enough of it. We don't hear enough about it. Like me, I always think whenever I'm talking to, whether it's like theatre people or telly people or whatever at the moment, when I'm pitching things, I'm always talking about, I just want to show the conversations that me and my friends have. Me and my friends chat about how much we fucking love being trans. We don't chat about like big awful trauma, because either we don't have it or we've already processed it, and like we're well adjusted human beings. Like we are adults, we're grown-ups, we're in our 30s, we have careers and jobs and families and lovers and engagements and ways of living that you just don't see queer people getting on stage or on screen. And I want to show the full breadth. And yes, there are some awful stories and there is some like terrible abuse, but like I think we've had enough of those stories now. We've seen them for decades. So I want to see stories about gender euphoria. I want to see trans rom-coms. I want to see stories about queer kids just fucking loving being queer. Like that's my real passion at the moment, is trying to get just authentic, fun, queer characters into things.
Yeah. Do you think that a lot of the smaller theatre spaces are doing that, and the people behind those shows or the people that have the venues are recognizing those stories and they want to put them on, as opposed to the big venues? And I'm gonna tread carefully here, but I but I get a lot of press releases through, and I see everything that's on, that's coming up, and I'm sure they're great, but they stick to the same storylines,
Yeah.
we've just spoken about. So do you think that the smaller spaces are recognizing this more, and they're the places that are kind of being more radical, and they're the ones to kind of set the example?
I feel like smaller spaces are programming more queer work, but I don't I don't know. It's a hard one, because I feel like work of queer joy is still really in the minority, and the work that is coming through tends to be like at Fringe or at Vault or places like that that are essentially open submission, open applicants. It's not these venues going out of their way being like, I want to program queer joy. It's, oh fuck, we need a queer show. What have we got? Oh, these people have applied. It's a happy story. Cool, let's put it in. And
Mm.
that might be me being really negative. Maybe they are actively seeking out stories of queer joy, and I hope they are. And venues, if you're listening to this and I'm talking absolute bullshit, tweet me, let me know, because I would love to know the venues that are specifically seeking out stories about queer joy. But I think it's more that artists themselves are starting to recognize it and starting to want to tell stories of joy more. And it's a lot easier to get that work done on those smaller stages, because the bigger stages, when they are telling queer stories, often it's not queer people telling them. Often it's still written by cis-het people, or it's written by older cis gay people who are still caught in a kind of cycle of trauma porn or things like that. So I hope you're right. I don't know if you are, but I'm also just very pessimistic, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's completely to be expected, to be honest. I guess creatives like you, theatre makers, they have more power the smaller spaces, I suppose. And then
100%.
does that inevitably mean that you perhaps get to have, you know, more roles within that production, or you get more you can make the decisions in who is part of your, or I guess if you're already a fully fledged queer theatre company, you've got more chance of having your show in a smaller space.
Yeah, it's because I used to only work with trans people, and then I learned that actually some trans people can be dicks as well, and that's okay. And that's true equality when some of us get to be bad people as well. But so now I tend to work with a majority queer team, but I try to always pick my own team and know exactly who I'm working with. And I've been really lucky actually with the few times that theatres have paired me up with other creatives and been like, oh, we're going to give you some money for a week and see what the fuck you come up with. That's always been with really solid people. And they've always aligned me with people who share my politics and share my ideas. So, like, at the end of, actually, it was just before lockdown. I was paired by a theatre company that I shan't name, but I was paired with the dance company Thick and Tight, who are an incredible queer dance company who make work about queer figures through history and like camp figures through history. And they're two of the best people I've met. I'm now on their advisory board, and we are putting together different policies within the company to ensure that all trans people are safe when working with them, all people of color are safe when working with them. And they really took lockdown to be like, okay, we're not prepared enough for the sort of people that we want to work with and we want to support. So let's bring those people in, let's pay them, and let's make sure that we can be the safest and like most politically sound company that we are. And I think I guess I'm quite outspoken about my politics as well on social media and things like that. So when theatres approach me or when companies approach me, they know what they're getting. They know what they're in for. I'm not like a super private person who doesn't share who they're voting for or doesn't have an ACAB tattoo or things like that. Like they know that if they were to like pair me with a Tory gay, I would refuse. It's not only that it would be shit work, it's like I just wouldn't do the work. I'll take the money, but I wouldn't do the work.
Yeah. So you'd think that this last year the bigger organizations would have like done a bit of reflecting, and perhaps the program, you know, we would be seeing more interesting stories for us, stories that are more reflective of the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah.
I mean, as you said, I guess it's about the people that are behind them, and that there's just no LGBTQ people, you know, doing these shows. Do you think that's the main thing? And how do you think we can, you know, push forward? Because literally so many of the shows that I have seen that are coming out or are out are just about the same thing.
Yeah. So I think you're right. It's about the people making the decisions on programming. It's about making sure that we have diversity within the creative teams, like in venues. And I've had a lot of conversations with people. So like you said at the beginning, I'm an artistic associate at Stratford East. So I've had a lot of conversations with Nadia and with the team there on representation and on diversity of both like gender and queerness and race and disability, which is something I'm really passionate about as well. And I know that some theatres have really done the work. And I know a lot of theatres have done a lot of work, but it's not necessarily being represented in their opening programs. So like a lot of theatres have just recycled their programming from before the pandemic because they felt like they owed it to those artists to get that work on, which I completely understand.
Yeah.
But also, if you're going to say that you're doing all of this work on engaging with new freelancers and engaging with different communities, and then you program an all-white season, like, people are going to call you out and call you on your bullshit. But also, like, I just don't understand the lack of transparency around it. Like, if the case is that this is all stuff that was programmed before the pandemic and you didn't want to lose the money or you didn't want to let down those artists, just fucking say that. Say, listen, we've got an all-white season. It's shit, but it's what we had programmed before. We've got to do it. And next season, we're going to do better. Like, I just don't understand the lack of nuance and communication. I think some artistic directors are fantastic and they are all women of color. So you've got Nadia, you've got Lynette, you've got Natalie up at Northern Stage, and their work, the work they're programming is always so diverse, whether it's Collapsible at the Bush, which, yeah, is a show by a middle-class white woman, but it's about bisexuality and it's so fucking good, and it's stuff that's really not represented, and it's by a bi writer, and it's, you've then got like Natalie's online first season for Northern Stage had, I can't even count how many trans artists worked on that season. And it was the first time I've ever been announced in a season where I wasn't the only trans person. And there were trans people programmed that I've never even met or heard of. And that is, like, that shows that Natalie is out there doing the work and finding these artists and finding Northern artists and Northern queer artists. And I just think, I just want the world to be full of Natalie Ebus, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess like what you're saying about having Northern artists, it's just about so much more than just the LGBTQ plus community. It's just about diversity across.
Yeah, and it's about like class as well. Like I'm getting a lot of work, and people, like, I'm very lucky, but I'm also super fucking privileged, and that's why I'm able to get the work. And I always try to be super honest about that. Like, yes, I'm trans, but I'm also white and middle class, and that means that I understand how to navigate some of those rooms in ways that working class trans people of color wouldn't, because I've been around those people my whole life. Even when I was having to hide my gender or hide who I really was, I was still around middle class white people who now run venues. Like, it's something that that's one of the things that we talk about in the courses that I run, is actually just meeting people and how to network and how to, like, theatre is gross and nepotistic. I don't know. There's a shitload of nepotism in theatre. And the way that I try to counterbalance that is by introducing everyone I know to everyone I know. So if I have a contact and you're a queer person and you want that contact, email me and ask for their email address. Drop me a DM and ask for their phone number, and I will pass it on, because the only reason that I've got so far is because I know people and I've met people, and that's only happened because of my privilege. So I'm really happy to share that with literally any queer people. And I think it's how we should all be. Like, people guard their like little black book of contacts in theatre, like, I don't know, like it's the Holy Grail. And it's like, well, no, it should be about the work, not about who you know. So I'm going to share those contacts all the time. And if that means I don't get programmed and another trans person does, that's fucking great. The more trans people getting programmed, the better. I don't want to be like just the trans artist or something. I want to be part of a massive community. And at the moment, there just aren't that many of us. You've got Milk Presents, you've got me, you've got Travis, you've got a daily a day, and then there's, I don't know, there are others, but there's not, there should be more of us. If you can name, when you can name like a million different theatre companies who come out of Cambridge and Oxford, like there are more queer people than have been to Cambridge or Oxford. Like there are more of us, so why aren't more of us artists? Why aren't more of us getting work made? And some of them did go to Cambridge and Oxford. They
Yeah.
should be sharing their fucking networks even more.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel a lot of,
Sorry,
yeah, I do
I
feel,
get quite passionate.
I love it. Do you feel a lot of responsibility to use the platform that you have to try and, you know, raise awareness, just kind of like bash down those doors and make things better, I suppose?
Yeah, I do. And I don't, sometimes I think I'm a bit too hard on myself, but sometimes I'm like, no, use your fucking privilege. Like, one of the things that I want to do is I want to run a venue. I want to be an artistic director one day, and I want to lead a company. And in order to do that, I need a really fucking good network around me of amazing artists. So I want to get to know them and raise them up. But also I want to do it with integrity, and I want to do it in a way that supports my community and supports everything. And I think, like I say, I'm so aware of my privilege and my luck. Like even super basic things, like my parents are really supportive, and loads of trans people don't have that. So like my parents have a spare room, and quite often if a trans person needs somewhere to stay for a few weeks or wants a little escape to the countryside, I send them to my parents, and my parents look after them for a week or two. And it's like every little bit of privilege that I have, I am gonna utilize to try and lift up the queer community, because we deserve it and we need it. And also, like, again, purely selfishly, I enjoy it. I like meeting queer artists. I like seeing good queer work. I like finding new people I could collaborate with, or seeing people who think in ways that I've never thought. And I just think, I think that queer people are inherently talented and creative. Most of us have to play a part for the first 10, 20 years of our life, if not longer. So, of course, we're going to be great actors or writers or directors or designers, because we've had to create our own worlds and communities for so long anyway.
Yeah. Well, I, for one, would be very excited to see you as the AD of a theatre one day. Hopefully
One
not
day,
too far
it's
in the
going to happen.
future.
It's going to happen. I believe in it.
Yeah. So if there are any, you know, artistic directors, people that program shows, etc., of the big venues, not just in
Mhm.
London, you know, all over watching, what do you want to say to them to, you know, get them to program more LGBTQ plus stories that are about joy, about our real lives, rather than just AIDS, trauma, you
Yeah.
know, all that business.
Yeah, I want to see stories about queer people. I want to see stories where someone's queerness is integral to the plot, but I also want to see queer stories where it's fuck all to do with queerness, and
Mm,
they just happen to be queer people,
yeah.
and that's just one facet of their identity. I want to see disabled queer theatre. I want to see queer theatre makers of color. I want to see neurodiverse theatre and queer neurodiverse artists. I want to see all of it. And I want to see trans people in your creative teams. I want to see trans writers and trans directors. I want to see trans associate artists, trans readers for your script. Like, so many, every theatre will have a certain amount of script readers for all of the submissions. And I know that when I'm submitting my plays to theatres, they're being read by cishet white guys who don't know the worlds that I'm moving in, and might think, oh, why do we need to hear about this? We've got gay marriage now, and things like that. You need to diversify from the ground up. I want
Mm,
your readers, your box office staff, your bar staff. I want all of them on a living wage, and I want them paid fairly, and I want them queer, and I want them people of color, and I want them disabled and neurodiverse, and all of the things. And it sounds like a lot, but it's super possible.
yeah.
But you have to adapt your way of making work and your way of running meetings and things like that. Like, if you have a neurodiverse person on your board or within your creative team, you might have to run your meetings differently. And
Yeah.
that's okay. Fucking change how you run your meeting. That's not that important. what's important is accessibility, and it's about making sure that not only you bring these people in, but you also make sure that the space is safe for them to be in and is accessible for them to be in.
Yeah. So how, if these people are watching and they're like, great, that sounds like something we need to be doing, but I'm not sure where to start. I mean, I think outreach work, is really vital. How do this start with this?
Pay people, basically. Pay people from the communities that you are not attracting to tell you why they don't feel safe in your building, to tell you why they don't apply to your open calls. Like, if you're doing an open call and you get 90% white people or 90% cis people applying, like, why is that? Because the world isn't 90% white. What is it about your wording, about your website, about your building, about your team that isn't accessible and isn't reaching these communities? And there will be really basic reasons that you just haven't thought about. Like, I once worked for a company, this was when I was doing office EPR work, and they always complained about how they would only get Oxbridge graduates applying for jobs and never get diverse people applying for jobs. But they only advertise their jobs on The Guardian, nowhere else. And it's like, well, that's why, like, you're not going out into these communities, you're not putting stuff on social media, you're not going and advertising in specific Black publications or specific queer publications. Like, you need to adapt if you want to be diverse and have people in it, because the structures that you are currently running on uphold white supremacy and cishet supremacy, and that is not something that many of us want to be a part of.
Yeah. And you know what? It's not even just the theatres and the venues, it's about publications like mine, like
Yeah,
AYT, and how we approach theatre and the people that are writing about it.
yeah, totally.
I've been on a journey myself. I mean, since taking over the company a couple of years ago, I've asked myself the same questions. Why aren't more diverse people applying? And it's because I was doing the same things. I was making the same mistakes. So I took on 2 outreach officers to try and rectify,
Yes,
try
amazing.
try and learn and actually do something about it. You can't just you can't just say, it was only white middle class people applying and then just keep doing the same thing. You just
Yeah,
can't. What is the point? You obviously are either just really lacking the knowledge, or you don't have the passion, or you don't have the right people around you to try and encourage.
yeah. And a lot of people just don't want to admit fault as well. They're scared that if they admit we're not diverse enough, that it looks bad on them. Whereas, like, you saying that you acknowledged the fault and you did something about it, and that's fucking great. Like, shit like that needs to be normalized, and not
Yeah.
like at the moment, I think when people do things like that, especially when white people do things like that, there's such a furore around, oh, how amazing it is and how selfless it is and how brilliant it is. And it's like, well, no, it's like, it's normal. That
Yeah.
should be normal. That is what we should all be doing, and it should be chill, and it doesn't necessarily need a press release. And I think stuff like that is where venues can fall into traps as well. Is like, they bring on someone to consult on diversity, but the first thing they do before they even have a meeting is put out a press release about it to show that they're diverse. And like that, if you're having to shout about how you're having to diversify, like, maybe you're not doing it right. Like, it needs to be done for the communities that you're reaching, not for the venue itself.
Yeah, it's just really about obviously thinking outside of yourself and just thinking outside of the box. Even though this should be the norm, it does take thinking, just thinking more objectively to actually make these changes. If you have like a specific experience, then acknowledge that you have that, and then
Yeah,
give
100%.
advice from people that have the experiences that you want to utilize, I suppose.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, and I guess it's about that leads on to, I guess, tokenism in theatres, and about just putting on certain stories about certain groups of people and just thinking that's enough. Great, we've done our job now. Well, no, it's not. If you actually listen to people like us, you would know that that is not what we want to see, and it is for a cishet audience. essentially. I'm sure there's a lot of queer people, you know, watching certain shows about trauma and like, well, this isn't that joyful to watch.
Yeah,
This is,
100%.
I
And
don't
it,
relate to this at all.
yeah, I don't know, there's just, you can tell when queer people are involved in a production. Like there are shows that have supposedly been about joy that I've been to see that have been super fucking traumatic because they've been created by a cis team who don't know what
Yeah,
is triggering or what is traumatizing to queer and trans people. And it's about having people engaged right from the beginning from the communities that you want to represent or reach or whatever that are involved, because yeah, it's basic stuff, or it should be basic stuff anyway.
yeah, yeah. It just takes, you know, people like you to just use your voice and never to feel like you're being too outspoken or, you know,
Mm.
too political, because it's what we need. It's what we need in theatre. It's what we need in the
Mhm.
world, everywhere, I think. There we go. Well, I feel like we've, you know, laid the world to rights or whatever
Yeah,
today.
perfect. This is our manifesto. Whoever's listening, if you can give us £1 billion, we're going to set up a great theatre that is just really queer and diverse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorted.
So I mean, so speaking of money, if you have enjoyed watching this video and if you enjoy AYT's content, the content we've been putting out for the last 11 years, then please consider becoming a part of the AYT membership, the AYT community. We'd love to have you here. From just £3 a month, you can really make a difference. You will help us to keep going and to keep giving you this work, to keep trying to make a difference to this industry, because we're all part of the same thing.
Mhm.
And you get some lovely perks in return. So I will put that info in the box down below.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tabby. This
My
is
absolute
great.
pleasure. This is such a lovely conversation.
Yeah, and I hope we get to have another conversation soon. I'm going to join
Yes,
Theatre
please.
Queers.
Yes, please do. Would love to have you there.
Yeah, that'd be great. So hope you have a
Amazing.
lovely rest of the day. Anyway, good luck with everything.
Thanks so much. Have a
Yeah.
lovely day yourself too.
All right. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.